Earth calendar year 2147 AD. When humans met the Galactic Commonwealth for the first time, it was pretty quiet compared to the other members of the Commonwealth. People felt sorry for them as they pathetically tried to grow and set up colonies nearby. Most of them forgot about the human republic that was just starting out, but some were interested in them from a clinical point of view and studied them in secret, hoping to find similarities and patterns in how their own species was growing into a spacefaring civilization. A long time ago, the older members of my species were more interested in the new interstellar society. They watched with proud, helpful eyes as the newcomers took their first steps into the void. We immediately felt connected to humans because they looked and acted the most like us of all the other species. The only real difference was that we still had prehensile tails and lived under trees. We saw them as cousins, relatives, and children. So we were interested in how they grew up. While we watched them from afar, we saw them bravely launch themselves into space to discover the amazing things that were there. Even though they knew they could lose ships and lives crossing the dangerous void, they were still interested in everything. Human scientists were cataloging everything they saw, from the tiniest alien microbes on empty worlds to crossing dangerous stellar nurseries in search of exotic particles. Human explorers would pick any star and head towards it just to see what was there. People were seen traveling the well-known trade routes, offering their goods and oddities for sale to anyone who would pay. We fell in love with this new species, and after watching humans for a few years, we decided to start official diplomatic channels and follow the rules for first contact. My grandfather was the first ambassador, and he played a big role in building a relationship with our cousin kin. He quickly became their biggest fan in our government, and he told me many stories about these people. When I was a kid, I was king. The most vivid memory I have is when my dad was talking about how the Ascension ship, which was carrying kids on a school trip, got stuck in a subspace rift that appeared out of nowhere in their path. His voice was filled with both awe and sadness as he talked about how dozens of human ships came to help. Ships that were scouts, cargo ships, pleasure craft, science ships, and even pirate ships answered. He remembered watching the sensor recordings with tears streaming down his face as he saw how bravely the human ships tried to save the younglings, even though many of them were destroyed or seriously hurt in the process. It didn't matter to them how many ships were damaged or lost. The people kept trying because more human ships would drop out of northern space in response to the call for help. They finally got the 25 Ascension younglings back, but it cost them over 800 lives, 12 ships, and dozens of damaged ships. Because they were willing to die for the young of another alien species, you couldn't help but be amazed. They weren't scared of the dangers, and when one ship was sunk or badly damaged, another would come in and take its place. It was an amazing sight to see. When he was done telling the story, my dad said that this event, along with other examples of humans helping alien worlds and ships in times of trouble, was what finally persuaded our government to help humans develop. The Commonwealth Charter made it very clear that giving primitive species technology that they had not yet developed was against the law. But our government got around these rules in a number of ways, such as by having alien ships mysteriously disappear or be destroyed by strange events in their human republic space, and then be found by humans. The Ascension went even further. As a thank you for the human sacrifices that saved their young, they sent an unmarked stealth courier ship into human space. The ship was full of their most advanced technology and a database of all their knowledge and technology. Over the next 20 cycles, humans made a 300-year leap forward thanks to the technologies and information that were secretly given to them. The Commonwealth was very upset about this. There were high-level hearings and investigations, but no proof was ever found that any of the members uplifted humans on purpose. After a few cycles, the issue was quietly put away. At this point, the human republic has grown a lot, and with the help of technology, it is now seen as a middle power. And they had ships all over the place, doing business, research, and exploration. Both of our species became related, and Ascension and I tried in vain to get the Commonwealth to let the human republic join, but most of the members strongly refused. The human ambassador and my sire father were both angry, but the humans didn't seem to mind. They even made a comment. We don't care what they think of us as long as they keep buying our stuff. The Eliana and the Ascension are the only ships that have been friendly to us, and we only care about what you think. In this way things were in 2172 AD, when the insectoid empire began to grow again and invaded Commonwealth space once more. The insectoid eyes were a hive mind made up of trillions of wasp-like beings that were 1.5 meters tall and still had their wings. They would sometimes grow and fight sharp battles with the Commonwealth and other non-aligned interstellar species, taking over territory. The queens were the only ones who could still fly, as most members of the Commonwealth thought the planets the insectoid wanted were not suitable for terraforming. We decided to pull back and let them have those worlds to avoid a major conflict. The insectoid had such a drastically different view of the world that it was almost impossible to negotiate or engage in diplomacy with them. We couldn't bridge the gap between the individual and the hive mind. There were only 2 words that the insectoid ever said to the Commonwealth: give leave. If they didn't do either, they would fight, and their ships, especially their hive ships, were very many and very strong. In comparison, our biggest battleships looked like toys for kids. The Commonwealth is hoping that this wave will end like the last ones did. When the insectoids did, the planets they wanted were caught off guard when the insectoid broke through the borders and into Commonwealth space. The Commonwealth fleet was caught off guard, and 6,000 insectoid cruisers attacked and caused a lot of damage. They destroyed every ship they came across, and 60 of their huge hive ships glassed whole worlds that were trapped behind enemy lines, killing all living things on those worlds without any mercy. Over 100 billion people died in just 2 days, and the outer border sectors of Commonwealth space were completely empty of all life. Ships and 8-member species were wiped out. The size of the Commonwealth fleet was cut in half, and it asked the other members to send their planetary navies to help the main fleet, which was under a lot of stress. Everyone in Alien and the other groups sent what they could, and we hoped it would be enough. When the humans learned about the attack, they sent an official government subspace message with a signed treaty of alliance and mutual defense pact. The Commonwealth government rudely ignored it, and the ambassadors sent to the humans didn't even bother to respond to their offer of help. That was the first and only time humans tried to help the Commonwealth when they were in trouble. After adding more ships, the Commonwealth fleet, which now had over 2,000 ships of the line, launched a counterattack. At first, it worked, and the fleet destroyed more than 3,000 insectoid cruises before the 65 ships came in and turned the tide of the battle in their favor. The Commonwealth fleet was down to just under 1,000 ships within 2 hours of the arrival of the hive ships. An additional 300 insectoid cruisers and 1 hive ship were destroyed. After the battle, the Commonwealth fleet's remaining ships stopped fighting and slowly made their way back to the core worlds, hoping to get the insectoid to follow them. The core worlds had strong and huge defenses like planetary defense grids and fortifications. The Admiralty planned to trap them by putting them between the heavily armed defenses and the rest of the Commonwealth fleet. The insectoid followed them to the edge of the main system. After getting back together, the fleet stopped hanging out in the heliopause of the system. The fleet sent out several squadrons to attack the insectoid, hoping that it would fight back and chase them deeper into the system, where the defense systems could reach them. When the Admiralty didn't expect it, the insectoid did something they hadn't planned for. It didn't go into space. Of course, the insectoid laid down and then went to the uninhabited edge of Commonwealth space, where 4 other members lived, including the alien. I remember being in our den with Saya's father and birth mother and listening to the Holloways broadcast our government's plea to the Commonwealth to help us. It was shown by news organizations that used drones to record 2-member systems along the insectoid axis of attack and the aftermath. Their home worlds and colonies were destroyed, killing more than 20 billion people. The insectoid fleet was heading straight for our system in 5 days. The next solar day, we finally got a response from the chairman of the Commonwealth. He looked like he was broken because he didn't want to look at the empty recorder and instead read from a prepared statement on the desk in front of him in a shaking voice. Based on what my admirals and cabinet told me to do, it breaks my heart to say that the fleet will not be able to help you right now. We will separate the aliens you sent that are still alive and let them come back to defend your system. They are being sent with our hopes and prayers that you will make it through the next 6 days. The transmission stopped all of a sudden, and another video appeared on Holloway's screen. This one showed the president of the Human Republic sitting in her office with a determined look on her face. As she looked into the empty camera, it was like she could see into our scared souls. Her voice sounded like it was threatening both death and salvation. We are the Republic, and we will answer the call," she said. "Wait a minute. We're on our way." As quickly as the transmission showed up, it was over just as quickly. When the hallway screen went back to the news studio, the anchors were sitting there in shock. Saya's birth mother passed out, but her father didn't seem to notice. He jumped out of his chair and hung from the ceiling branches, hooting and swinging like a crazy youngling. I was speechless and shaking as I thought about how terrible our impending death was. I didn't understand how Saya's father felt. When he finally saw the birth mother, he jumped over to help her while she cried in his arms. He looked at me and seemed to understand that I was happy. "You want to know why I'm so excited about the idea of our human friends coming to help us? I know that people are taught in school to be a middle power. We have never seen any of their warships in space, though. Have you ever thought about that?" He asked my birth mother and me. I didn't answer. I'm still not sure what a warship from a middle power could do to stop the insectoid. He kept talking while the birth mother calmed down. "I have seen one of their warships and copies of the records of the wars they have fought in the past. Not a single species in the Commonwealth would be able to fight them, even though their technologies are different." He stopped to think about what to say next. People aren't always nice and friendly. They have another side to them, a side that no one has ever seen before. In a society that travels through space, some people, like humans, kill themselves before they get to space. They made it through the great filter against all odds. He stood up and grabbed me by the arms. His eyes looked like they had never looked that way before. The human ambassador told me that after the Commonwealth turned down our membership request, they were allowed to join. "There is no greater friend and no worse enemy than a human being," said the human ambassador. "If they ever attack us or our allies, may God protect them." It wasn't bragging, my dearling. That person told me the truth with a conviction I've never heard from another living thing. You already know what they gave up to save those 25 Ascension younglings. That day, they didn't know. Think about what they do for their friends and allies. He took my arms away and hugged me. "Do not be afraid. Our friends will save us all when they get here." He said these words with such conviction that they seemed to reach into my heart, and I felt a peace wash over me. I quietly cried tears of hope and joy in his arms. It was the first time I thought we might not die after all. The next 2 days, while we waited for people to come, we watched the sensor drones record the insectoid fleet's steady march toward our homeworld. It made sense for our government to send questions every few hours about when the Republic fleet would arrive. The only answer given was a vague one-sentence answer. We finally arrived on the 3rd solar day, 1 solar day before the insectoid was supposed to show up. We got a message from the edge of our solar system. "We're here." After this, a message asked our government to let the Republic fleet enter. The permission was given, and every news camera, satellite, and sensible thing was pointed at the right places. A lot of aliens were waiting for their last chance to fall out of normal space. It felt like time had stopped, and the heart of the world had stopped beating. Then it took place. First in single digits, then in groups of 10, and finally in groups of 100. Exit flashes began to appear all around the area around Alanya, lighting up the sky like new stars, even during the day. On the side of the news channel we were watching, there was a ticker that showed the number of ships, along with their estimated classes and tonnage. The numbers moved up so quickly that it was hard to keep up. I stood there with my mouth open in shock as the numbers on the screen were shown. Saya's father and birth mother were hugging and crying tears of joy. The cameras panned back to look at the huge fleet while sensor drones flew by and sent the images to every hollow wave screen on Eliana until the numbers stopped moving and finally settled on 6,294 ships. A huge number of carriers and thousands of starfighters were swarming around them. Many thousands of cruisers, destroyers, and other ships that were marked as, because the scanners couldn't get a reading on them, were also there. Another message from the fleet came through the hallway screen. It showed a man in a military uniform standing on a huge bridge with hundreds of other people working on data screens in the background. "The people of Eliana, we are the Republic fleet, and we're here to help our friends. We keep our promises, and I promise that if the insectoid wins, it will only be because every Republic ship has been sunk. We're people, so we don't run. We're here to win this fight. Please do what your government tells you and stay safe wherever you can. Wish you all the best. Take Admiral Thompson out." The transmission ended, and the images of the fleet were shown again. The fleet was already spread out across the system, with different tasks for each ship. The carriers had the most troops, and the destroyers were dropping hundreds of small items out of their sterns on random paths, out of sight. The news anchors started to guess what the Republic had planned, while retired military experts tried to figure out what the Republic was doing, especially with the ships that were still not being scanned. We ate a lot of our favorite foods for dinner because we knew it might be our last. This went on for hours, even though we hoped that humans will save us. As we fell asleep one by one, the news kept playing in the background, getting more and more urgent. A few hours later, someone woke me up by shaking my shoulders gently. It's already started. The insectoid father of Saya made his point clear and went to the den to join the birth mother. I jumped up and followed him, sitting where I always do in front of the hallway screen. A split screen showed live video and pictures of the Republic and insectoid fleets fighting outside of Earth's orbit. Another screen showed a top-down view of the battle lines, with icons for friendly and enemy ships listed in the colors of the ships from a sensor drone above the plane of the ecliptic. On the Republic side, the battle fleets moved into place while the ships disappeared in a flash of light that seemed to go on forever. The carriers let go of their thousands of starfighters, and battle wings of the huge battleships, accompanied by cruisers, blasted their engineers at full power to get to battle speed and head to the sides of the battle lines. There were hundreds of destroyers screamed along the battle lines, moving around randomly and ready with their point defense systems and advanced countermeasures suites to protect their bigger brothers and stop any sudden attacks. They used the same simple but effective strategy that the insectoid has always used. There is a solid formation with all 59 hive ships packed into a rough sphere to help each other with fire support. The insectoid cruisers provide close cover on all sides as a screaming force, and the formation looks like a knight's fist with a mailed glove on top of it. What an unexpected move. The insectoid fleet sent a message to the Republic fleet that said, "Leave." In response, the Republic sent a video of someone smiling as they set fire to a wasp nest. Hundreds of wasps ran out and were quickly destroyed while a happy tune played in the background. The words "trouble with wasps" were written in standard galactic below the video. Not a problem. Get the Republic fleet to handle it. Today, the Republic fleet sent out the video on every frequency, bandwidth, and channel that everyone in the galaxy knew about. Their response was also sent out on all of Eliana's holiday screens. Saya's father and I started laughing really hard, while the birth mother clenched her hands together in fear and looked at us with disapproval. As the hive mind thought about the Republic's response for what seemed like an eternity, the insectoid fist formation sped up towards the Republic's battle lines and fired their particle beams. It was time for the Battle of Leonia, Earth year 21 and 72 AD, as the 8th swarm. The queen of the insect empire is whirled. The hive mother was furious in her brood chamber as she watched the visual message play out in the eyes of her millions of worker drones in the swarm. She saw the insulting images play over billions of faceted images that came together in her mind to form a clear three-dimensional picture. An animal was setting fire to a nest of eggs and making a funny face, which was a clear sign of what these new creatures planned to do to her swarm. She was uneasy as she looked at the huge fleet of animals lining up against her. She didn't know what risks these animals posed. The girls who were queen were right. It was time. She told herself this as she tried to hold back her anger and think about the chemical processes that would help drones do more work. Feeling her body started to conceive the larvae again and push them out of the birth canal. A male drone followed her pheromones into the room without thinking. He was blindly focused on her sex organs and penetrated her as he died after a brief moment of ecstasy. The hive mother looked back at the pile of male corpses that was building up behind her and felt new genetic DNA flowing through her sex organs. She told herself, "I'm so tired. Lots and lots of daughters have come from me. There are a lot of people to feed." She felt sad for a moment as she looked around the brood chamber she had been stuck in for 30 solar cycles while making and inseminating new larvae all the time to make sure the hive would survive. "Before I die, I wanted to feel the sun's warmth one last time." In her mind, she felt like new people were there, and her 12 queen daughters filled her with thoughts of love and support. "We're right here with you." They told her what they thought. She could feel how strong they were, and a new sense of energy came over her. She kept her mind on one daughter in particular, Queen, who was in charge of the 8th swarm. Swarm, daughter, are you all set? A very long way away, the hive mother sent. She felt a wave of confidence coming from the swarm daughter, but she didn't share it. Instead, she hid her thoughts. And your sister queens will always be with you. The swarm daughter sent happiness and excitement, ready to prove herself once more. She got out of the easy trap they were trying to set for her in the animal core world. After a short time, she looked through the eyes of her many worker drones. While the hive mother watched, the swarm sped toward the animal ships. She was getting ready for the fight, though her swarm daughter was facing many new threats. As she watched, the animals in the middle of the formation looked like they were scared and running off in all different directions. Her swarm daughter gave her pleasure as she charged into the gap and fired all of her weapons. As the mother bee changed her view of the battlefield by getting into the minds of thousands of drones at the same time during the battle. She didn't realize how scared she was that her swarm daughter was going straight for a trap until she switched to the drone views in the reserves behind the formation. No, 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 no. She screamed in her head as she saw the front of the swarm formation fly through the gap and get hit by fire logs from the animal ships that were just running away as they flipped their ships on their thrusters and started to drift backwards with all of their bow weapons aimed at the gap. There was a wall of grape-shot railgun, slugs, missiles, and plasma bolts that hit the fist formation as it moved forward. Hundreds of animal ships fired at the same time, in a way that the hive mother had not seen in a long time. She felt like hundreds of thousands of worker drone minds were taken away from her, which was terrible. It was possible to see the hive ships because the front of the fist formation had been peeled off. The same animal ships fired again right before they moved out of range of the weapons. Another round of death shot through the group of hive ships, destroying 2 of them completely and seriously hurting several more. After that, she was furious as she saw those spirit ships that she couldn't feel and had left at the start of the battle appear out of nowhere in the middle of the swarm formation and do things that a ship with animals could not do. The spirit ships sped up so fast that the hive mother couldn't keep up. They then slashed through the middle of the formation of hive ships, firing 3 shots of plasma bolts and powerful particle beams that cut through the tough organic skins of the hive ships. The hive ships sent back thousands of particle beams that were aimed at the spirit ships. Most of the beams missed because the spirit ships dodged the target locks with high G moves. They kept making a path of destruction and chaos until most of the spirit ships flashed back into null space when they got past the formation. Some spirit ships couldn't get to null space because their engines were damaged. They tried to avoid being hit by particle beams, but were destroyed anyway. At the same time, the thousands of tiny ships that had come out of the animal hive ships hit the now messy formation, buzzing around like the angry corpse gnats that lived in the hive cemeteries. The gnat ships fired penetrator missiles that went through the holes in the cruisers and hive ships and hit them. The last stages of the boosters turned on and went deeper into the ships before setting off their antimatter charges. The antimatter charges sucked in and then blew out the holes in the cruiser and hive ships, making big holes that let out thousands of worker drones. The gnat ships then went after the huge holes in the ground and fired more missiles and their rotary plasma turrets, which fired dozens of bolts at a time, setting off huge secondary explosions deep inside the holes. Cruisers and hive ships used their point defense weapons very well, and the swarm lasers caused hundreds of ships to crash. But they kept attacking and destroying more cruisers and hive ships, not realizing that they were being wiped out one by one. Finally, when the nuts ran out of weapons and gas, they started doing evasive moves as they ran away. The mother, who was about to give birth, was thrilled to see the point defenses get target locks and kill hundreds more gnats as they ran away right before the point defenses fired. On the edges of the now broken fist formation, those cursed spirit ships flashed back out of nowhere at full speed and drove into the middle, firing triple shots and particle beams at ships that still had working point defenses. They seemed to work together as a single unit, whose only goal was to mess up the target locks and destroy cruisers and hive ships that were already badly damaged. The hive mother took control of all the weapon worker drones and started aiming all the particle beams at a single spirit ship. She then watched as hundreds of beams from all directions hit it and it exploded, leaving hundreds of target locks open. She chose another spirit ship and fired again, this time killing it. The Nat ships used the cover to get out of the formation and back to their animal hive ships in a stream. The broken formation let the spirit ships move through it and into open space. One of the ships flashed back to normal space as it was hit by hundreds of beams and exploded. The hive mother took control of a nearby worker drone and looked around her hive ship in shock as the debris field around her quickly grew. Now there is a much smaller group because many of the hive ships are listing out of control from huge explosions inside them. During the brief break in the battle, the hive mother reached out to her swarm daughter. "Daughter swarm, are you there?" The mother bee in the hive tried again because she thought there was no answer. "Daughter swarm." She suddenly felt the presence of her swarm daughter in her mind, and it was full of fear and determination. "Daughter swarm, I'll take over sleep." In her mind, the hive mother sent a command to put her queen daughters to sleep. She then took over the commanded drone of her swarm daughter's hive ship. The drone didn't fight back. The crew of the hive ship noticed all of a sudden that the commander drone was staring at them with eyes that were filled with intelligence that sent queen hormones through their bodies. As soon as they smelled the pheromones of acceptance, they went back to their work. The leader drone gently picked up her daughter, who was now sleeping, and told worker drones nearby to take her to her queen chambers. The hive mother sat on the dais in the middle of the command chamber like the swarm queen and tried to find her way around. She told the weapons drones to fire all of their lasers and missiles at the groups of animals in the distance, hoping to make some space between them and her rapidly shrinking formation while she brought order to it. She started flying around the formation again and got views from worker drones from all directions. This is when she realized how dangerous her situation was. The animal battleship's wings that had shot off to the sides at the start of the battle were now finishing their turns and moving to surround her formation, while hundreds of tiny animal cruisers blocked most of her missiles and messed up her laser fire control, making it hard for her to lock onto the bigger animal ships. "This swarm needs to leave," the hive mother thought to herself as she saw an animal cruiser that was badly damaged crash into another hive ship and do terrible damage as it hit the side of it. And the animal cruiser's crew put too much on their core. A mini supernova blew up the hive ship, along with another hive ship and a lot of cruisers. Over 1,000 animal ships had already been destroyed, but they kept coming and fighting her swarm, which was getting smaller and smaller. She watched as the animal battleship wings came in behind her formation and started slugging with her other hive ships while firing huge broadsides of grapeshot and 24-inch depleted uranium. Just less than a kilometer away, the railgun fired slugs at the huge hive ships, and the grapeshot destroyed the point defenses. The railgun slugs blasted huge holes in the holes. Some of the slugs went all the way through, making even bigger holes on the other side of the hive ships. The battleships and heavy cruisers then used their secondary plasma turrets to attack the breaches. Thousands of heavy plasma boats added to the death toll by digging deeper into the huge holes in the hive ships that were already badly hurt. The battleships and heavy cruisers made of people looked like a group of fish swimming among a pod of whales. But their deadly attack and weapons destroyed 11 more hive ships. They also left behind the broken hulks of 42 battleships and 132 heavy cruisers as they went through her formation. As the battleship wings that were still alive flashed back into null space, the remaining spirit ships jumped back in and weaved through her formation again, stopping her counterattack and destroying 5 more heavily damaged hive ships. The hive mother was too shocked to do anything about the spirit ship, and they flashed back into no space without getting hurt. The mother of the hive thought to herself as she chose to end the fight. The swarm's remains had now gathered into a small, perfectly round group of 14 undamaged hive ships and 400 cruisers. Their battle momentum was already pushing them toward the inner system. The hive mother saw that the rest of the animal fleet was out of place as they flashed out of nowhere and tried to rearrange their battle formations so they could attack her again. For a moment, she felt safe. The swarm, which was now much smaller, was moving toward the inner system while she told her weapons worker drones to keep firing in an arc that covered the whole area. It felt like the engines of the hive ships were still sending power to the capacitors in null space. The hive mothers could tell that the capacitors were getting close to being fully charged. The group of swarms went past the 4th planet's orbit and into a stealth minefield set up by the humans who wanted to destroy everything. From the commander drone, the mother of the hive saw as thousands of tiny objects appeared out of nowhere and sped toward her other ships, attaching themselves to their hulls. What is this? Just then, the first mine went off and started blasting chunks out of the holes. She thought to herself, because there were so many of them, cruisers and hive ships were losing a lot of pressure because they couldn't fix the hundreds of small holes in their hulls. As she watched, more hive ships decompress and thousands more worker drones fall through the holes. She saw a huge number of the tiny mines moving toward the hive ship she was on. It was too late to get out of the queen's chamber, where her swarm daughter was sleeping. She wailed in her mind. Hundreds of meanies had already jumped on the Hela ship and started their charges. The hive mother, Dottie, couldn't finish the thought and screamed in pain as she was ripped from the mind of the commander drone as the hive ship dropped violently. The hive mother's mind suddenly rushed back to her body and her brood chamber on the queen world. She was shocked by the loss of her swarm daughter and screamed in a way she had never felt before. Right away, she could feel her other queen daughters trying to comfort her and feel her pain. As she blocked them out, she thought, "I have to save what's left of the swarm." She quickly switched her attention back to the worker drones on the hive ships that were still alive. She watched with sadness as those drones also died in the minefield. In the end, only 34 cruisers and 2 hive ships were able to make it to null space. The hive mother was so angry that she slashed at a male drone that came into her brood chamber at a bad time. She picked him up and tore him in half where his thorax and abdomen met. When she was angry, she threw the male drone's 2 pieces to the floor and watched as he twitched in his last moments. She felt bad about throwing away his genetic DNA. She could feel her 11 remaining queen daughters trying to get into her mind. She opened the door and let them in, letting their thoughts and feelings mix with hers. The other queen daughters joined her in her grief over the death of her swarm daughter, making her think of ways to get even. "Ladies, a queen hasn't been killed in battle since the Great Persecution. These animals also killed your sister. Before I could share her memories with you." It hurt her to see them sad as they came to terms with the death of their sister and the end of a valuable genetic line. The hive mother was so upset about her queen daughter's deaths that she let it wash over her, which made her even more angry. "Daughters, we are going to swarm. Choose between each other who will build the swarms and who will protect the hives. Do not get in the way of my thoughts until you make up your mind." As she sat there by herself, she felt her queen daughters do what she asked and leave her mind. She collected all the thoughts of the drone she was controlling during the battle and, with almost perfect memory, played back the whole battle from beginning to end, looking at it from every angle as it did so. The hive mother's super strong brain collected billions of data points and analyzed how the animal ships were maneuvering. Deep in her genetic memories, she felt a stirring as her ancestors, the hive mothers, tried to be heard. After a very long time of silence, one ancient hive mother reached out and told us about the time when they were persecuted and had to move to this area of space. As images of old battles and whole genetic lines that were lost when queens died kept going through her mind, the ancient hive mother made her feel something she had never felt before. As she went back to thinking about the fight with the animals, she gave the feeling a name, and it came over her all of a sudden, making her fear make no sense. Just about any home system. The year 2172 AD. As we watched the insectoid speed up its attack on the Republic fleet, Saya's father made the Holloway projection bigger until it covered almost the whole wall of the den. He used his retired government ID to log into the satellite and drone network. More projections appeared, showing the battle area from different angles. I saw the Republic fleet hold its ground, with battleship formations firing off to the sides and frigates and destroyers moving into position in front of the fleet. As it listed and categorized the ship classes and functions, the sensor network gave me information. I saw that the ships that had just been fleshed out were now listed as null ships. I tapped the icon that was floating and read out loud as the information from the Republic fleet scrolled by. The Battle AIS controls these naval ships, which don't have crews. The hulls are filled with null space particles. It says that they are stealth battle cruisers and that they are powered by antimatter reactors. My dad gave me a grunt and looked at me. I told them that these people are much smarter and stronger than the Commonwealth thought. I didn't say anything because I still didn't think the humans had a chance to win. I shut down the information screen and watched as the insectoid moved faster toward the Republic fleet. Filling in the blank, the frigate began to move backwards while the destroyer squadrons fired up their thrusters and began to move both above and below the ecliptic plane. The heavy cruisers that were anchoring the middle of the Republic lines shot out in a panic and ran away, making the area look like a starburst. I knew it. We're dead. I thought to myself as I saw the humans leave the middle of their battle lines. I also saw Birth Mother cry and put her head in her hands, while Sarah's dad still had a stupid grin on his face. The bug toys turned on their engines and changed their course a little to take advantage of the fact that the middle of the Republic fleet was now completely empty. As the insectoid fleet headed toward the gap, I knew it was over right then. I was confused as I saw the ships that were running away suddenly do pinpoint flips with their positional thrusters and start going backwards at 30,000 kilometers per hour. The gap that the insectoid was going through was marked on all of their ships' bows. "What's going on?" I yelled, and Saya's dad told me to quiet down. The Republic ships that were running away fired. Before it filled in, the hollow wave screen flared brightly, and I watched in stunned shock as the Republic fleet's huge amount of weapons fire smashed right into the gap. The insectoid fleet and hundreds of cruisers protecting the front of the formation disappeared in an instant. The ships from the drifting Republic fired again, and this time I saw 2 Hive ships explode while others were hurt. When the insectoid formation fired a huge hail of missiles, the Republic frigates that had been pulling back rushed forward and blocked it with particle beams and plasma turrets that filled the battle space with terawatts of raw energy and knocked out thousands of missiles. The missiles that made it past the first line of defense were then hurled at a solid wall made of millions of tungsten bearings, while the frigates fired hundreds of canisters of grape shot every second. The grape shot tore through the insectoid missile volley's remains, and the remaining ball bearings kept speeding up, smashing into the formation and breaking up many cruises. At the same time, the destroyer squadrons that had gone above and below the ecliptic were now in those positions in relation to the insectoid formation that was coming toward them. They attacked the formation with their 29mm Gatling guns and plasma railgun turrets on the ventral and dorsal sides. The high-speed bullets tore through the upper and lower shells of the cruisers like a buzzsaw. A huge number of insectoid cruisers broke away from the formation as plasma bolts and 30mm hypersonic slugs tore through them and hit the Hive ships inside the formation. When the destroyers were done strafing, they went out into space, leaving behind more than 150 Republic hulls that were broken and exploding. This was because the insectoid formation attacked back and thousands of particle beams cut through them. The bug-like thing fired another round of thousands of missiles at the destroyers, but the screaming frigates jumped forward, turned on their countermeasures and point defense systems, and a lot of the missiles were either blocked or destroyed. So far, dozens more destroyers have been killed, but they hung their heads and quietly prayed to God to save their souls. As we saw thousands of people's lives end right in front of our eyes, as I watched them charge into battle with all their might, I broke down in tears of shame and begged for forgiveness for thinking they were cowards. Suddenly, hundreds of no-space flashes showed up inside the fist formation. The null ships also showed up quickly, firing triple shots of plasma bolts and cutting through the holes in the Hive ships with heavy particle beams. They were speeding up at unbelievable rates, and the few target locks that did manage to catch them were easily broken by the evasive moves they used. The insectoid beams couldn't seem to lock onto the nanoparticle hulls, and thousands of beams shot into the battle area but missed. They worked in groups of 4 and hit nothing. The null ships were very good at aiming their weapons at specific Hive ships. As they went by one target, another group of 4 would come from a different direction and hit the same part of the Hive ship's hulls, blasting open huge holes that threw bodies and frozen fluids out. The null ships kept moving through the formation, leaving a scene of chaos and destruction behind them as they disappeared. Some of them were finally destroyed when they failed to enter no space. As soon as the no ship's signal went off, thousands of starfighters charged into the battle and hit the formation hard, firing penetrator missiles that went deep into their targets and then blew out huge chunks of the holes with antimatter explosions. My son Saya's dad yelled and pumped his fists to show support for the starfighter pilots. Before he worked for the government, he was a planetary defense pilot himself. While we watched the starfighters attack the Hive ships, We saw dozens of them blink out every minute as they hit the point defenses and kept going. Even though there was a lot of death, they were destroying the formation as hive ships started to list and exploded internally. The starfighters finished their attack and ran off into space, having lost over 1,000 fighters in their fierce attack. While the cruisers were being destroyed, the starfighters targeted their hull breaches with their turrets. When the null ships came back, they flashed out of nowhere at full speed and tore right through the bleeding formation. The insectoids seemed to have changed their strategy because their weapons were now firing much more accurately, and as they moved through the formation, damaging and killing wounded hive ships, individual naval ships began exploding under the weight of hundreds of beams that they couldn't avoid. A lot more naval ships were sunk before they disappeared into thin air. The insectoid formation then started to get smaller as it moved forward. It left a trail of burning ships and wreckage behind it, like a comet bleeding its way through the sky. With heavy broadsides of 16-inch railguns and secondary plasma turrets, whole wings of Republic heavy cruisers attacked the sides of the formation while the insectoids were temporarily repositioned. They were able to break through the cruiser screening force. When insectoid cruisers got damaged, they fell out of formation. This made holes in the formation, which the heavy cruisers then used to fire plasma bolts and missiles through, damaging and destroying several more hive ships. The formation's counterattack used thousands of missiles and particle beams to hit and destroy 112 heavy cruisers and damage dozens more before they could get out of harm's way. Earth Mother let out a loud gasp, and I looked at the infographic that appeared out of nowhere on the side of the hollow wave screen. It showed that the number of destroyed and damaged Republic ships was being quickly updated, and the number of people killed and hurt was already over 200,000 and going up. The Birth Mother turned her head away from the rapidly rising numbers and cried and murmured while putting her head on Saya's father's chest. "Those poor people. When is it going to end?" Heaved. A father sat there with tears in his eyes and a grim face. His hands were shaking and balled up into fists. I was filled with strong emotions, so I ran outside to the deck to stop the flow. As I looked up into the sky, I let out shaky gasps of relief that all I could see were stars and darkness, free of the wrecked ships and floating bodies of our guardians. I took a few deep breaths to calm down, and then I went to the forest canopy and urinated. My bladder had been screaming at me for over 3 hours, ever since the battle began. When I went back inside, Saya's father was the only one there, along with his birth mother. I asked, "She's had enough. It breaks her heart to see more people die." He said, "Leave her alone," which made him sound like he was at his breaking point. I sat down quietly and watched as a badly damaged Republic cruiser changed course, shot at a hive ship that was behind schedule, and hit it hard. Almost halfway into the hull, the two ships silently spun together in a spooky dance for a moment before the cruiser threw too much into their core and blocked out the hollow wave. Everything was fine after the sudden burnout, and those two ships were gone, while the core breach completely destroyed a nearby hive ship and dozens of nearby cruisers. Then the battleship wings smashed through the formation. It seemed unlikely that they could have done it so violently, given how small the battleships and heavy cruisers were compared to the hive ships. The badly damaged battleship wings finished their attack runs and headed for open water to safety. It was like the null ships came back into no space and killed any damaged hive ships that were still working. They then went back into no space without losing any ships. The insectoid formations began to shrink and rearrange themselves until they formed a perfect sphere and sped toward the inner system. The Republic fleet was going in and out of null space, trying to get their spread-out formations back together so they could chase the insectoid formation as it got close to the fourth planet. I started to feel scared because they looked like they were going straight for Earth, which was the second planet from the Sun. In the corner of the screen, a new countdown showed how much time was left until the formation arrived at Eliana. A battleship task force and several hundred frigates and destroyers were left by the Republic fleet to help the few alien warships that were still in the system as a last line of defense. A picture appeared that showed the main icons of the Republic fleet and where they were in relation to the moving formation. It was clear that they would not be able to catch them in time. Both of their new space capacities were not fully charged, and their relative speeds were not fast enough to close the time gap. I yelled in fear, "That's not enough to stop them." Saya's father put up his hand to silence me, leaned closer to the holloway screen, and said, Wait. He looked incredibly wild and scary. As the formation went by the fourth planet and got closer to Eliana, I had the sudden urge to go to the bathroom again. All of a sudden, there were thousands of pinpoint explosions all over the formation. Insectoid cruisers and hive ships started exploding, careening out of control and suffering massive decompression as the sensor drones suddenly zoomed in and we saw tiny objects appear out of nowhere, speed towards the other ships, latch on, and then go off. The formation was now just a shell, and it looked like it had lost all control and stopped sticking together. As the ships moved deeper into the minefield, they drifted and crashed into each other, not trying to change course or even save themselves. The last 2 hive ships and about 30 cruisers all of a sudden flashed into null space, ending the battle. That's why my dad and I were stunned and quiet until he jumped up and screamed, "Take what you got that Ishka took." Out loud, I heard birth mother gasp from the other room. She ran into the den and yelled, "Nim to language," as I turned my head and blushed in shame at what he said. He laughed when my birth mother told him off, then grabbed me and gave me a tight hug. When Birth came over and added her arms, we all just quietly sobbed in relief, even though we were tired and shaking. After a while, I was trying to stay awake while sitting in my chair. As we waited for official word that the insectoid threat was over and Eliana was safe again, a message that said, "Please stand by," showed up on the hallway screen. There was a picture of a scary bird of prey with its wings spread out and one foot holding a branch in its talons, while the other held some kind of pointed sticks or spears. The bird looked like it wanted to fly off the screen and rip my face off. Below the mean bird was a stylized banner with words written in human language. Mors oppressor rebus is ruled over by Libertas. Our translator translated this into intergalactic standard as freedom to the oppressed, death to the oppressors. After a short time, Admiral Thompson showed up on the screen. He looked old and worn out, like he had aged 10 solar cycles since we last spoke. Back behind him on the bridge, we could see broken consoles and conduits, and there were noticeably fewer people looking at their data screens than before. He looked into the hologram camera and spoke. "The insectoid fleet has been wiped out, and our scouts on long range say they haven't seen any insectoid ships within 100 light years. I'm going to say that the alien system is safe. It cost a lot for us to win this big battle. We will stay here for now while we fix the damage we got in battle and send out search and rescue ships to bring back dead and missing people from the void." He paused, and as he spoke again, his voice became a little shaky. "Any civilian ships that want to help can do so. Your help is very much needed because we need to get to the survivors before the air runs out. We also need medical staff because there are so many injured people that we can't take care of them all at once. Your government is now setting up a link system portal to make the process easier and get you to where you need to go. Please use this to coordinate any rescue efforts." After taking a deep breath, he pulled a folded square out of a pocket on his chest. He opened it up and said, "President Lopez wrote this. I'd like to read you the message." He began to read if we came out on top and saved the world. "If Admiral Thompson reads this letter, it means we won and kept you from going extinct. The Republic will always be on your side until the very end, no matter how many lives, ships, or treasure it costs. We remember when you reached out your hand to be friendly and helpful. When we were still a young species, we took our first steps into the... Of all the things you did for us, you were our true friends who accepted us for who we are and helped us find our way. You have proven that you are a good person, so we trust you, love you, and will always love you. Any hand that is raised against you is always raised against us. We will always remember how nice and friendly you were. We will always be linked by blood. You'll never be by yourself again." When the Admiral stopped reading, tears were running down his face. He carefully folded the paper back up and put it in his chest pocket. He turned around and looked back into the empty camera. "That's all for now. People, let's get to work." The transmission was over. We were all crying out loud, and we kept crying for a long time afterward. The queen of the insectoid empire in the year 2173 is World. The hive mother, focused as the glands on her thorax, kept releasing silk as she skillfully added it to the structure in front of her. She was amazed at how the shape was taking shape as she worked quickly to finish it. Then, she told an organ inside her to make a certain harmonic frequency, which she then sent at the construct. seeing the silk crystallize in response to the frequency. The hive mother then stared at it and imagined it down to its smallest parts. She then focused on leaving her essence on it. She felt happy for a short time when she got a thought echo. Then she told one of her worker drones to bring it to a relay ship that was waiting for it. It was her job to tell the drone where in space she wanted the focuser to fall, and then she watched it leave. Before the swarming, she sent out dozens of relay ships to increase the range of her thoughts. Now, the focus is being dropped deeper into animal territory than ever before. Because of the fight with the animals, she had to make a lot of changes. For example, she stopped putting fertilized larvae on the hive ships so that they could colonize quickly and taught her queen daughters how to build new ships to fight the new threat. The mother of the hive reached out with her mind and got into a worker drone on one of the building worlds. She then looked out over the huge, flat area that went on forever. She saw millions of worker drones rushing around, bringing in supplies and making parts for the thousands of cruises that were only partially finished. She left that world and went into a drone on another build world. There, she stood among hundreds of monster shells that would turn into hive ships while tens of millions of worker drones did their jobs. She went into a different drone on the other side of the planet and saw the new ships being built for the first time. One of them was a hybrid acid cruiser heavy that was in the middle size range of the two classes. She talked to an ancient hive mother who gave her the plans for this type of warship that was important to the hive fleet during the Great Persecution and the migration that followed. When the hive mother went back to her brood chamber, she sent her thoughts to the old one and felt her move in response. "Thank you, Mom. I want to know more about the abuse," she told her. That old one sent her a wave of fear and sadness for a short time, but then memories that weren't her own started to come back to her. The memories went back hundreds of years and showed a great hive empire that covered many worlds and was full of resources. The great hive built worlds that were full of hundreds of trillions of workers and thousands of queens living in peace that is only known to intelligent species that are alone in their space area. In their memories, they saw their first meeting with an animal species that was growing and had met the hive empire. The hive mothers tried to talk to these animals at first, but they didn't answer. Animals don't talk about their thoughts, and those who heard the noises coming from the animal ships thought the animals were trying to talk. The memories got darker all of a sudden, and the hive mothers saw thousands of animal ships coming into the hive empire. They used antimatter bombs to destroy any ships they found in space and destroy whole worlds. She felt the pain of the Ancient One as the bombs hit the hive cities and killed trillions of her daughters and hundreds of her queen daughters. The hive empire didn't have any weapons or ships for war. They didn't need them because they never got into wars with each other. They've been alone all this time. To fight back, they crashed into the animal ships and destroyed or disabled them. They also learned how to make weapons without space engines by taking one of the disabled ships back to their homeworld and taking it apart to figure out how to put it back together again. As more of their worlds were destroyed over the next cycle, they quickly put together a fleet of their first warships and hive ships to defend their own. The animal ships came into the system, but they didn't go any further than the asteroid belt. They stayed there for almost a month. The queens and mothers of the hive didn't know what to do. Not having any experience fighting a war, they did nothing but wait. As their doubts about these animal actions grew, all of a sudden, they saw thousands of asteroids hurtling toward their ship at speeds that shouldn't have been possible. When they fired their guns for the first time, many of the targets they were aiming at went over because they didn't know how to do that. Other guns also didn't work right. They were horrified as the asteroids slammed into their fleet, destroying hundreds of ships. Thousands of asteroids then entered the atmosphere and hit, sending shockwaves into space that could be seen as huge fires spread and gigatons of soil were thrown into the air. The few hive mothers and daughter queens who were still alive in the broken-down fleet were the only ones left of their entire civilization. They ran away, leaving their birth world in the midst of global fires and quickly falling into darkness. As the animal ships chased them across thousands of light years, attacking them whenever they tried to set up a new hive, they ran into the cycles. They finally got off the animal ships, but they kept moving for another 100 cycles until they felt safe enough to start a new hive world in a part of space where there were no other spacefaring animals. The hive mother was in terrible pain as she thought about how the actions of the first animals they had ever met had almost wiped out her whole race. Thank you, honored mother, for telling me about the hive, mother thought as she felt the old one leaving her mind. The mother of the hive thought about the animals she had fought and how violent they were. Mourning, she lost her daughter queen. She thought about all the times her empire had won against the animals over the last 50 cycles as they spread out to find more worlds to settle with hives. The hive mother who was in charge before her didn't want to grow and fight with the animals, but she still saw them as enemies and tried not to make things worse between them. I had to add more. Our worlds don't have enough resources to feed everyone who wants to eat. She thought to herself as she thought about her first loss over and over again. This animal is dangerous. Also, I need to kill the old animals first and use their worlds as hives, if we want to stay alive. The hive mother then remembered the battle, just like she had done a million times before. She thought about what she would do the next time she faced this new enemy. She had a sudden flash of inspiration when she thought about the terrible times she had been through and called her 11 remaining daughters queens. They got into her mind and waited for her to think about them. You need to figure out how to move asteroids and make them into weapons. We don't have enough ships to go after the animal world and destroy their fleet and defenses. We are going to use the asteroids to attack their worlds and ships. She was done feeling how confused her queen daughters were as they tried to figure out what she wanted. Find a way to do this now, before the animals get strong again. The queen daughter's thoughts left her, and the hive mother, realizing it was night, went into her sleepy state and dreamed of asteroids hitting animal worlds. Eleanor's apartment 2173 AD. 8 solar months have passed since the Battle of Leonia, and my home system is pretty much a stranger to me now. Many of our civilian ships came out of hiding deep in the system and from our world after the battle to help the Republic fleet look for survivors among the wreckage and bring their injured to our medical centers. The rest of our contingent that had been split off from the Commonwealth fleet arrived a day after the battle, limping into the system and not in good enough shape to fight after fighting the insectoid in Commonwealth space the day before. They were greeted like heroes, and the Republic fleet gave them honors just for being willing to fight the insectoid fleet even though they were in a bad way. The Republic fleet lined up on both sides of the assigned course for thousands of kilometers. They flew their battle flags and fired training rounds as the weak remains of our defense forces passed through them on their way to Earth. A lot of the Republic ships also had a hologram of a broom moving from side to side. A week after the battle, we found out that this was a human way of saying clean sweep. A big group of hundreds of freighters came from Republic space with much-needed supplies to help the ships get stocked and fixed up. There was also a smaller group of huge fabricator ships that arrived. In the same month, they were able to build 3 Republic shipyards in orbit around the planet. Autonomous mining drone ships took off from our 2 asteroid belts and sent it to the fabricator ships in a steady stream. They made the ore better and made the parts that would be used to build the shipyards and then the defense systems that the Republic built to protect our system. The damaged ships that could still get into null space went back to Republic space to be fixed up. The more severely damaged ships that couldn't get back to Republic space stayed in system and did what repairs they could until the shipyards opened. They were able to build 3 military shipyards in such a short amount of time that I told Sarah's father how impressed I was. He laughed it off. I couldn't say anything when he told me that the Republic had more than 200 shipyards like that in their space. He said they had a lot because they hadn't had a fight in over 100 cycles. I asked him why. He also said, "People say that if you want peace, get ready for war." I couldn't understand how they could have such a huge war machine when the Commonwealth, which used to be almost 4 times the size of the Republic, only had 20 shipyards to build warships. This was the first time I realized how little I knew about our saviors. Once they were done building their shipyards, they also built 2 more military shipyards that met all of our needs so that we could make our own warships. We had a lot of trouble in the government and with the people because we couldn't count on using the Commonwealth shipyards anymore. We were one of the first members and have been in the Commonwealth for almost 200 cycles. It was 3 solar months after the battle that we did the last thing that severed all ties with the Commonwealth. When an official from the Commonwealth government came to the Illini system, they were rude and told us we were behind on our taxes. They also threatened to punish us for letting a foreign military set up shop in our system. Even though they had betrayed us, our government hesitated and didn't want to end our membership. They left us to deal with the insect weeds on our own. When he heard what was going on, Admiral Thompson made the decision for us. He sent a message to the Commonwealth envoy. There were only 2 words on the message: get bent. Task forces from the Republic then surrounded the Commonwealth ships with weapons drawn and locked. They accompanied the ships of the Commonwealth to the outer system as a show of protest and warned them that any more breaches of alien territory would be seen as acts of war. The messenger told both the Republic and Eliana that bad things would happen before their ships disappeared into thin air. Over the next 2 months, Eliana was a hive of activity as hundreds of thousands of humans arrived to help us combine Republic systems and technology with our own to make working together easier. Scientists from both the Republic and the Army were looking through the wreckage of the insectoid ships to learn more about their technology and weapons in order to get ready for the upcoming battles and make better armor and stronger weapons. In order to serve as ambassador to the Republic, Saya's father was called back to his old job. As soon as our government began talks with the Republic to figure out what kind of relationship we would have with them going forward, many people on our executive council and in the population wanted to officially join the Republic. However, it was the humans who quietly turned down the offer, saying that we should experience what it means to be truly free and able to stand on our own before making such a choice. On the 6th-month anniversary of the battle, President Lopez paid her first official visit to the memorial service. I was always amazed at how many different sizes, shapes, and colors humans came in, but I was shocked when I saw her walk down the ramp to greet our premier. She was small and shorter than most people I had seen, but her presence and sense of purpose made her seem bigger than everyone else. Later, I found out that she had been a pathfinder for 20 years, which is one of the most dangerous jobs in the Republic military. Because there were so many Republic deaths, it was decided that the names could not be read in the traditional way at the ceremony. The people agreed when our government asked for permission to honor them in the alien way. At the heart of our capital city square, there were more than 500,000 people there illegally and hundreds of thousands of people. There were millions more in the nearby districts, though. Isla Yani. When the ceremony began, there was the loudest silence I had ever heard. 1,000 at a time. Small holographic lights rose up and hung above the people. The lights got brighter and changed into the heads and upper bodies of the people they were supposed to represent. Their names, ages, and the ships they served on will be shown. After a short time, they turned back into light globes and began to rise into the sky. They sped up their movement until they burst into spears of light that shot into space, looking like they were joining the heavens. Then another group of thousands of globes appeared. This went on until the last lights joined the sky, and all 167,538 people who were killed or missing had gone to their next destination. Because it was so strong, you could feel the emotion in the air. As the millions of people who came in tears, the Republic and alien delegations broke down in public. In her speech to the Executive Council the next day, President Lopez laid out her plans for the future. She asked for a military exchange program to help our armed forces work together and teach the Alien League how to do things the Republic way. By sending alien ship crews to work on human ships and making a whole class of alien cadets who will go to Republic space and follow their training program. She told the Executive Council that the Battle of Eliana was just the beginning of many more to come and asked them to act like they were at war. Then she showed the Council information gathered by Republic spy drones that had gone into insectoid space and found information about thousands and thousands of ships being built on different worlds. Another thing the spy drones showed was that the insectoids still had ships patrolling their space. These ships were twice as big as the fleet that attacked the Commonwealth. She didn't speak until the Council had a chance to think about what she had said. It costs a lot of lives and ships to fight, but we can't wait any longer. We end wars, not start them, because we are the Republic. She stopped and looked around the Council with a deep look in her eyes. She went on talking. We don't agree with the idea of a defensive war. The Commonwealth fought the enemy when it had to. See where that got them? We think it's important to strike quickly and hard, and we will always move forward. The only way to win is to hurt the enemy deeply and take away their power to start a war. When her turn came, she put her papers away and asked if anyone had any questions or concerns. No one spoke up, and then she dropped a bombshell on the chamber before you could decide. I have some good news. A group of Zen people are on their way to Eliana. They should get there in 2 days. When they learned that you had been left behind, they decided to leave the Commonwealth and have taken control of all Commonwealth military ships in their area. Those ships are coming with them, and they also want to make a deal to work together and protect each other's sovereignty and the Republic of Lebanon. The council let out loud cheers of approval, interspersed with laughter, because the Ascension was known to be a troublesome member who always made the Commonwealth angry. President Lopez left the room, and while the council talked, my dad took me outside to get some fresh air. In 2 months, you'll turn 18 and start getting gray hairs. You'll also be old enough to make your own decisions. That's sign of a manly man. Do you know what to do? He asked me with a serious look on his face. It looked like I was thinking about what to say before I answered, but I had already made up my mind. I looked him straight in the eyes, puffed out my chest, and hit it twice with my fists. I want to fight for our world as a cadet. I went down a little as I felt the weight of the words, as I said. What I just said hit me hard and made me lose my courage for a moment. Simon's proud dad looked at me and gave me a hug, telling me in a whisper, "You are the best gift a father could ever ask for. I'm happy for you." He let me go and turned away, his face wet with tears. "Kindly don't tell the birth mother yet. I will tell her when the time is right." It was that time of year when a Saya father loses a youngling and then gains a manling to solo months later. We walked back into the chamber together. I'm on a Republic cruiser right now with the rest of my cadet class, waiting to flash out. It amazes me that my home system has a holographic layer on top of it. I used to be sure that we were all going to die, but now I look at my home system and feel bad for the insectoid if they ever decide to come back. A lot of warships are patrolling the system, and even more are patrolling the space between the stars within 200 light-years. The system is full of huge forts, thousands of defense satellites, and millions of what people call mosquito mines, because they shoot out of nowhere and bite you. I thought about Birth Mother this morning as I watched the flash-out countdown get closer to 0. She was shaking her hands in fear, thinking that her young ones would come back bloodthirsty. Saya's dad is beaming at me and giving me his pilot wings as a gift. It makes me feel good to know that the scared Illini cadets around me are having the same thoughts. A person in a uniform appears out of nowhere and runs at us. His eyes look like they want to pop out of his head, and his forehead has a lot of veins. He is yelling at us, and his spit hits our faces, making us jump. He hits his forehead, which makes him think of something, and turns on the translator device that is attached to his harness. As soon as the translator steps in, his words hit us like a hammer. "You guys have 5 seconds to get to your berths before I rip the monkey heads off your necks and use your esophagus as a toilet. I'm the drill instructor. Move, move, move." We split up and run for our lives, but we have no idea where the hell we're supposed to go. A system 3.5 parsecs from Earth's Queen world in the year 2173 AD that is not inhabited. The Queen saw the asteroid slowly speed up as dozens of small harvesters turned on their thrusters and kept digging for fuel. As the harvesters kept taking out the needed elements with their feeder arms, the asteroid sped up even more. More oil to work with, powered by a steady supply of fuel. The thrusters kept going, pushing the big chunk of metal and rock toward target, a planet with no life. A few hours later, the Queen had strong feelings and thoughts that were at odds with each other. As the asteroid went off into the distance, it continued on its path, and is now hurtling through space at over 150,000 kilometers per hour. She thought to herself, "I have always been different from other people." She played back her whole life, from the time she first came out of her cocoon to the present. She didn't think like her sister, queens, or the hive mother. She hid her weakness from them because she felt bad about it, always afraid of being found out. When she felt weird, she put that part of herself away and buried it deep inside her, trying to get rid of it while she did her job as queen and turned inward. She remembered how sick and ashamed she felt when she knew what her sister was thinking while she killed billions of innocent animals in the animal worlds. Her mind went through visions as she saw whole worlds being hit by nuclear bombs and bodies of water flashing. As thousands of particle beams hit the planets from space, she thought about how scared and hurt the animals must have been as they died, and her essence reacted to the needless death and destruction it was seeing. She said to herself, "You are just as guilty as any of your sisters for making the harvesters." The internal conflict was about to get the best of her after the Hive Mother told her to find a way to move asteroids. She left the commandos and went to her queen to try to get control of herself. The visions of death and pain turned into a tidal wave that swept her away. She gave up fighting it and let herself drown it. It was time for the queen to feel the dread mountain side of her as she drifted alone in a scary, lifeless darkness. As she drifted on the surface of a black ocean, she suddenly saw herself through billions of fractals. She realized that other people were watching her and that she wasn't alone. She could see a long line of her genetic ancestors going back to the start of their race. As she walked down the line of her ancestors, the black ocean turned into an endless plain of obsidian glass. She could feel their thoughts awakening inside her. It was time for the accusations of betrayal, so she curled up into a ball to protect herself. No one came. She stretched out a little and peered out, thinking there might be a trap. When nothing happened, she spread out fully, stood up, and screamed at her ancestors in her mind. "Why are you still here? I'm ready to be judged." They looked at her sad eyes, and she could feel their thoughts entering hers. Their thoughts were not judgmental, but filled with sympathy and understanding. She cried because she felt them comfort her and let her know she wasn't alone because she carried them inside her. They were gone from her mind, and she saw one of her ancestors move away from the others. And to her, she was a mother bee from a very long time ago, when her ancestors were bigger and only lived on their birth world. She was a beautiful reminder of that time. "Our daughter, you woke us up by calling out to us with your essence. We were able to wake up because of the pain you carry without going through the change that only a hive mother goes through when she takes charge of the hives." Then she clasped the queen's claws together, and the two of them flew away, leaving the black void behind them. The queen found herself back in her chambers after waking up from her vision. She could feel all of her genetic ancestors inside her. As they left her with feelings of love and support. She noticed that her commander drone was outside her room, sending out pheromones to let her know that she was needed. The queen got up from her room, followed the commander drone, and then went back to her spot on the command dais. The hive ship had stopped 800,000 kilometers away from the lifeless planet. The queen watched the incoming asteroid on the projector screen as it hurtled toward the planet and went by in front of the hive ship. In a matter of seconds, it hit the planet hard and released an unimaginable amount of energy. A bright light and a shockwave went across the planet, setting the methane atmosphere on fire. Gigatons of soil were thrown into space, and the crust was lifted and broken up thousands of miles away from the impact zone. The planet kept spinning in a fiery circle while it was being hit by the fatal blow, and the queen thought about what it would be like to be on the planet as the destruction happened. She could feel the hive mother inside her let her know she was there and shared her thoughts. It was horrible to see how much damage was being done, and the hive mother begged the queen not to let this happen again. "I have no choice," the queen said. "I have to follow the hive mother." Then she saw a picture of the hive mother inside, which showed her going into the brood chamber on the queen world and committing the only real crime in the death of the queen. The queen backed away from the thought and the mother bee inside her, pushed deeper into her mind. "Please stop the hive mother from going down this path. The hives will die, and all of our memories will go with them. You need to take charge of the hives and save our species before the animals kill us all." The hive mother that was inside her left her mind, and the queen was shocked when she looked back at the hurt planet. In spite of her strong desire to follow the hive mother and protect her species from extinction, she had a new thought. She imagined going into the brood chamber and taking over the hives. She could try to stop the swarming and the crazy if she were the hive mother. She only had to do the worst sin their species knew how to do. System for Matricide Polyphony. The year 2173 AD, RSS flagship of the Indomitable Republic. The human scientist was sound asleep at her desk when a loud alarm woke her up. She woke up and lifted her head to look at the screen. She was half awake and about to press the next specimen icon when she saw the neural tissue. She jumped up from her seat and ran to the table. The corpse was on and changed some settings, looking at the diagnostic screen as it showed that the results were correct. "Who? Oh boy," she said excitedly as she typed on the phone. "Also, come down now." As she moved the scanner back over the body's head, she yelled. Then, Owen ran into the lab a short time later, out of breath. Claire, what is it? He let out a gasp as he quickly began to take in the information on the screens. Yes, he told himself in a whisper as he tried to calm down. He looked over the scan results again slowly and confirmed what he saw. Emily grabbed the neural tissue display and flicked it onto the lab wall's big hollow screen. They both gasped as details began to appear. The scanner kept moving around and making noises as it did a deep scan of the insectoid head. On one screen, it showed a rotating 3D model of a folded brain with 6 lobes. On other screens, it showed nanoscale slices from the front and side. Based on what you can see on the screens, this must be a queen. Emily kept switching between views as she looked at the brain structures. Look at the density of the cortex and the size of the mushroom bodies, she said. Owen agreed, and he tapped an icon on the screen that showed a brain organ and said, uncategorized. I bet this is the command center where they can keep an eye on the drones. He said it, then smiled and looked at Emily. This is going to win us the Nobel Prize. The next day, while they waited for everyone to find a seat, Owen and Emily stood tensely in front of a conference table. After making sure everyone was comfortable, Admiral Thompson looked at the scientists and gave them the go-ahead. Emily was in charge and began the presentation. This is Dr. Owen Masiello, and my name is Emily Garrity. We are experts in entomology, which is the study of bugs. Owen began to flick through scans on his datapad while she looked at the empty screen on the wall. She went on to say that we have reason to believe that one of the specimens we got back from the battle is a queen. These are the scan results that are being shown. As the Illini delegation spoke in a low voice, she stopped. The humans just stood there and waited. She went on talking. Because of how you're responding, I can tell that this has never happened before. I'll go ahead and keep giving the presentation for another 2 hours. Both Emily and Owen took turns going over the scans and showing proof that they thought the figure was a queen. They talked about how the brains of the suspected queen were different from those of the drones, and how they thought the queens would control their drones and what kind of command structure would be in place. After their presentation was over, a neuroscientist from the University of Illinois was the one who asked the first question. Based on your opinion, what kind of intelligence do these scans show? The cortex looks very complicated, and the folds and 6 lobes show that our ability to think and process information is very advanced. The two scientists gave each other a quick look before Emily spoke. After looking into it, we are sure that the queen has as much processing power as 20 human brains, if not more. The people at the table were humming as they thought about her answer, and she kept talking. The queen seems to be a very smart being because everything we've seen shows that she can feel, think, and reason just like us. Because of this and her huge processing power, we now have more information about how an insectoid hive species has become able to build a technological society like theirs. Owen caught her eye, and she gave him a nod. Owen began flicking through scans of the drone brains on the empty screen and pointed out an organ that was separate from the drone brain but connected by a thin tube made of filaments. At first, we thought this organ was how drones got instructions, or maybe it was just an old and used part that wasn't needed anymore. Like our appendix, it's not part of the brain itself. Still, the sheer number of neurons inside it doesn't make sense for either of them. This is true unless you add a queen. As Owen talked more, he started to get excited. We now think that this is similar to an external data port that the queen can use to boost her own processing power or turn it on so that the drone can do difficult tasks that normally would be beyond its capabilities. Think about the fact that this organ can do both jobs for millions of drones. Now you could work together to solve problems and do hard tasks while a queen watched over you. Oh, you could put some research papers on the empty screen and highlight some parts as he spoke. For hundreds of years, people have thought about the possibility of an intelligent insect species. Even the most basic insects on our world are smart and feel pain. We have never seen proof of sapience, though. Many ideas have been put forward about how an insect species could build a technological society and travel through space, but the chances are very slim for a number of reasons. There are 3 main ideas about how this could happen. The first idea is that the insect civilization grew and then moved forward slowly over millions of years because there aren't many of them that can think and create intelligently. 2, they come into contact with another species and, either by being raised or being exposed to alien technology, they get ahead in technology. Over millions of years, they keep making small improvements. Oh, and stop talking before going on. When he looked at Emily, she gave him a small nod to keep going. 3. That the queens reach a level of intelligence and skill that is much higher than that of individuals in a species with a rich technological history. For lack of a better word, this superintelligence would let a species with only a few thousand members come up with new ideas and inventions quickly, even though there aren't many of them. The first fusion reactors were only made possible by tens of thousands of scientists working together over almost 100 cycles. It might only take one queen 50 cycles, or even less if she put a few million drones to work on the job herself and got them to process. As soon as the other queen was done talking, she walked back next to Emily. "We're ready for any questions." Admiral Thompson was the first to speak. He rubbed his temples as he thought of what to say. "This is not good. It sounds like you're telling us that we are fighting a species of super-smart wasps that have full control over trillions of drones. So what does this mean for our war effort going forward?" He asked as he looked at the two scientists who had just dumped a huge crap sandwich on his already full plate. Emily told the first admiral, "We can't be sure what they'll do next or how our victory will change their strategy. There is no doubt in my mind that the queens have learned from the battle and have probably already tried millions or billions of different combinations." As the human and Eliana observers began to nervously talk to each other, Owen stepped forward and highlighted what he thought was the Queen Command control organ. "This is similar to what you do when you play your war games. Please let me add something," he said, getting their attention. "To communicate with and control the drones, I think this organ is important. I also think it's where their telepathic abilities come from. There is no record of them talking to each other, and their ships have never sent out any signals that would suggest they do. At least when it comes to the queens, they must be talking to each other in their heads." Admiral Thompson raised his hand to stop the observers from talking when they started to ask questions. He then waited for them to stop. "What do you think should be done, Dr. Masiello?" Owen looked back at the scans and thought for a moment. He then turned around and faced the admiral again. "I want to catch some drones and a queen that are still alive and study them here. If we can find a way to stop the queens and drones from talking to each other, we can make it very hard for them to do their jobs and take away most of their command and control abilities." The admiral sat back and looked at the scientists as he thought about what this could mean and how dangerous it would be to try to do reconnaissance and ground operations in insect territory. With all of this new information, his mild headache was about to turn into a migraine. He made up his mind and pointed at the two insect experts. "Keep working hard and let me know what's going on. Everything, no matter how small or unimportant it seems. Please send all of your requests to my office, and they will be met right away. Thank you for your deep and interesting presentation. Are there any rounds that have been saved?" He looked around the conference table and asked. He stood up to show that the presentation was over because there were none left. As the observers left the meeting room, he went over to the two scientists and shook their hands. After everyone left, he gave the two tense scientists a warm smile and said, "Well done, doctors. In this case is my private note. If you need me or are having trouble, don't be afraid to use it." Owen took the calm node with a sheepish grin, and Emily did nothing but stare at the admiral with awe. The admiral clapped his hands and asked in a jokey voice, "Well, what the hell are you still standing here for?" After an awkward moment of silence, "Let's do something." He laughed to himself as he saw them rush to the door of the conference room and drop their pads as they tried to get through it at the same time. He turned away so they wouldn't be embarrassed when they found out he saw them and set his radio to a dual frequency. He told the leaders of the Marine Recon and Pathfinder regiments that they should meet him in 30 minutes for lunch in the wardroom. Both of them had been complaining for months that their men were getting lazy on his ships because they had nothing to do. As he left the conference room, he laughed to himself. They might finally shut up if they get snatched by an insectoid world.